looked at my cell phone and it said, "You're in extreme danger."
It felt like an eternity, and yet it was over within just minutes.
We just survived a tornado.
That would go down, the next one would come in. It was a lot of chaos.
Welcome to the Summer of Tornadoes documentary, where we'll be looking back at North Dakota's record-setting 80 tornadoes in 2025. I'm meteorologist Jacob Morse in Enderlin, where the strongest tornado of the year in EF5 touched down just to the east of town. I'll be explaining how these tornadoes happened and share the stories of those impacted in this documentary. North Dakota's summer severe season typically features thunderstorms capable of producing large hail, damaging winds, and about 23 tornadoes per year, most of which are weak or don't impact towns in this rural state. But the summer of 2025 was different, with a very active jet stream and lots of spin in the atmosphere for multiple tornado outbreaks to occur. The previous record for most tornadoes in a year in North Dakota was 61 in 1999, with 2025's total surpassing that by a whopping 21 twisters, more than triple what's normal. This map shows how all 82 tornadoes occurred throughout the year, with the majority in the southern, central, and eastern parts of the state. The first two tornadoes of the year were very weak and observed on May 15th in Pembina and Cass counties as part of a severe weather outbreak to the east across the Great Lakes region. Otherwise, it was a rainy May in the northern plains with a lack of severe thunderstorms.
Started out very slow in May, nothing out there, just made one chase here and there. All of a sudden, I think after June 15th, it just started like every weekend was just a constant event or system that came through, and it was a lot of driving, a lot of keeping an eye on what's the next forecast, trying to be in the position.
The early morning of June 16th saw damaging straight-line winds in southwest North Dakota, including a 94-mile-per-hour gust near Hettinger. The next day, this same spot saw the third weak, brief tornado of the year. Much stronger storms were in the forecast in the coming days, with June 20th circled on many storm chasers' radars for tornadic activity.
Everybody was looking ahead the next day. They were looking at June 20th as being the big day. I mean, everything on social media, all the storm chases were traveling up north. Okay, so I've known that you cannot overlook the day before and the day after the main day. After looking at the 11 o'clock update, I kind of knew I needed to leave work and get to the North Dakota-Montana border. I called a chaser out of Fargo and I told him, I was like, we can't sleep on today. I think we need to get out there. There's going to be storms. Did I know what was going to happen No. You never go into it thinking that you're going to get that. But we knew there were storms, and you love to chase weather, and the possibility was there.
And Shane and I were kind of talking more and more like the days previous, and I was like, I might as well. I mean, it looks okay. And then the day of, as I was driving out there, I was honestly a little surprised.
A supercell thunderstorm in Stark County on June 19th produced an EF1 tornado with 97-mile-per-hour winds that damaged a few properties near South Hart and south of Dickinson.
You know, that's where I grew up, so I knew the area like the back of my hand. So coming off of the Belfield Interstate exit there, I knew the storm had a chance just by looking at the structure and the rotation that was happening. I knew I needed to get south. Watching the first funnel spin up on the ground so fast was exhilarating. I did see a couple other cars, residential cars, kind of pull up beside me, and you kind of have to let them know, hey, you probably don't want to be here. I was directly south of it, so I figured I had a pretty good escape route to my south.
I intercepted just when it was kind of coming just to the west of Dickinson a little bit. Gassed up, dropped south, parked at the airport, got a just spectacular cinematic, perfect view of this thing, and it was with a textbook wall cloud and the whole 9 yards. Just to see its anatomy and having that sun-kissed backdrop and the perfect contrast. I'm right next to a tornado siren as I'm filming this. It was just everything I wanted it as a filmmaker to make a really good episode was there. It was interesting though, because a lot of folks think that, first you see the funnel cloud and then the debris. And this was not the case this time. This time, the ground swirl was evident far before the actual condensation funnels were. And that was really neat to see. You could see the multi-vortexes going on at the same time, which not a lot of condensation funnels until later. Then it became partially rain wrapped, but you could still see a very large cone funnel for a long time, which I even had some time to get some great aerial shots of that.
There was another chaser that kind of met up with me where it provides a sense of security to have someone else there. It's not just you. So there was another chaser there, so I kind of knew, like, okay, we're gonna kind of play off of each other and try to keep each other safe. But watching it go from a dusty little vortex on the ground underneath a wall cloud to a dusty, almost wedge form, cone form tornado within 5 minutes, that was really exciting. The structure that followed that was just as good. I mean, if that tornado would have never happened, the structure that followed, the LP nature and seeing the clouds explode in the air, that was worth it.
The most significant tornado outbreak of the year happened on June 20th, the summer solstice, with the threat well forecasted, even highlighting the potential for strong tornadoes. However, the probable development of a derecho was more focused on, with heat and humidity ready to fuel severe thunderstorms.
That very sticky air, that air you can wear factor with highs in the 80s, dew points near 70, that is fuel for thunderstorms.
That was really the first time all season that we saw the combination of really large instability and wind shear plus a weather disturbance moving through the area all come together. We saw really high dew point air move into the region on June 20th along a warm front. And that warm front was able to give just enough spark to develop some supercell thunderstorms in the Jamestown and Valley City areas in the late evening. Those storms kind of gradually moved off to the east and southeast and began producing prolific tornado production, really, through the late evening hours. Meanwhile, a stronger disturbance at the jet stream level was moving into southwest North Dakota at the same time. That formed a line of storms along and north of that same warm front where there was really strong instability, strong wind shear, turning of winds with height in the atmosphere that contributed to the development of that long-lived Boeing line of thunderstorms that became the derecho.
Derechos usually only happen once every 4 years in parts of North Dakota, but can be as damaging as tornadoes, even though winds are from the downbursts of thunderstorms. The destructive power of the June 20th derecho was felt over a wide swath, while numerous small-scale tornadoes developed and were embedded within the line of storms. Many of these tornadoes received an EF unknown rating since they didn't hit anything, but some did do damage, including a few EF1 and EF2.
The first ones of those developed back in Morton County, and there were several others as that system moved across the state. That same strong low-level wind shear that produced the supercellular tornadoes in southeast North Dakota was also favorable for tornadoes within that line of storms. Those lines of storms don't always take advantage of that, but in this case, the combination of how well organized that line of storms, that derecho was, combined with the magnitudes of the instability in the wind shear, led to embedded, almost supercell type features within the line of storms that produced those tornadoes as it moved across the state.
The strongest tornadoes of the day, including an EF5 east of Enderlin that passed over this spot, occurred ahead of the derecho. Individual supercells were able to use an undisturbed atmosphere with heat and humidity and an ample amount of spin in the atmosphere to produce strong tornadoes.
The supercells that formed in the southeast part of the state formed in an environment that had just a little bit of what we call capping, that little bit of warm layer aloft that tended to keep them a little more isolated. What that did is it allowed them to use all of the energy in the atmosphere to their own sole benefit, unfortunately, and there was really extreme instability and extreme amounts of wind shear, both near the ground and all the way through the deeper parts of the atmosphere to levels that we don't typically see supercell thunderstorms develop in. A lot of times we'll get those environments, but that warm layer of capping aloft won't be able to be overcome. In this case, the warm front was just strong enough to give that lift, that little spark, to get those storms developing in that environment and then to have them result and go on to produce tornadoes in southeast North Dakota.
And some renowned storm chasers are already setting up shop in North Dakota. We know what that means. It's going to be a very active day.
Woke up in the morning, not getting much sleep because you're up, you're looking through footage, you're editing, you're getting things ready for news crews and getting things out on social media. So didn't get much sleep, went into work that morning, kind of thinking that I'm just going to play the same area again. You know, there's going to be a better chance of storms firing in southwest North Dakota versus the eastern part. Everybody thought the cap was going to be very, very strong and no storms would form. So in my head, I was like, well, let's play the western target again. We had good luck there. I know that area. Updates go by. You have other people talking in your ear.
This wasn't an easy decision. I mean, like I was actually on the phone with Shane for the better part of the day, him and hawing about this. I'm like, God, what do I do?
Some people are playing western parts, some people are playing the eastern part, so you just kind of sit and wait. It's kind of a hurry up and wait game.
The eastern North Dakota target along the warm front, which just, I mean, you couldn't have more maxed out severe weather parameters than that. I mean, it was one of the most potent setups I'd ever chased. So I knew if something could go, it would be big. But we still had that uncertainty about if storms were going to even fire. A lot of the more trusted weather models weren't showing storms at all over there. So it was obviously very concerning considering, you know, some of us had driven quite a long ways. But we also knew that we would just absolutely be kicking ourselves if something happened and we missed it.
I was like, God, that's one heck of a cap to break, you know? But if it breaks, boy, it's gonna be some serious stuff.
Then the National Weather Service put out a balloon, and that kind of showed us that 700 temps were not that warm as expected. So I was like, well, yeah, okay, let's play the east part of the river and see what happens.
I tossed a coin. Like, you know what? We're gonna do the high gamble thing.
And I drove down to Steele, and I posted up in town to kind of watch the models because it was like I didn't want to bail. I had a hunch.
We sat in Steele for a few hours kind of contemplating life. You know, did we make the right decision? Nothing was forming.
I was sitting in Steele and we were trying to figure out what our target area was. My buddy texted me and he was like, I'm thinking like Carrington or like maybe Harvey. And I was like, Harvey, are you kidding me? Like that's where my family's from. That's where the farm is. That's where grandma is. And I was like, yeah, we're doing Harvey, guys. So we all drove up to Harvey and grandma fed us watermelon and we just discussed the weather models and checked out our cameras and stuff. It was like a scene straight out of the movie Twister. You know, we're all at Aunt May's house, as it were, before the storm. It was a pretty cool experience.
My target was southeast North Dakota, within about 50 miles north or south of I-94. And I wanted to get out west, out towards Jamestown that morning.
And then we could see on radar a little blip by Gackle, North Dakota, and game was on there. We took off after that. We could see the updraft take off, and we can see the crispness of the clouds the way we did. We knew that there was some power behind that updraft.
We watched the mesocyclone form, and then just to the north of that, there was the hail shaft, which from what I understand just ravaged Jamestown with baseball hail and did a lot of damage. And it tracked like more east-northeast at that time. So we had the very rare opportunity to just troll along I-94 and pull over, get some film, go a little more, pull over. I honestly thought it was going to throw down right along the interstate there, and we could just see it. It was like right there. I was like, oh, this is it. No, not quite. It was so close, so close, so close. We were just outside of Spiritwood. I made a decision, let's just go north a little bit because I can see a collar cloud, and it's moving. And the collar cloud is like, for people that don't know, it's like the collar cloud, the wall cloud, and then, you know, the tornado. If the collar cloud is whipping, that thing is imminent. It is about to throw, like right now.
One of the things is when the wall cloud was initially starting to develop. I've seen a lot of tornadoes and a lot of storms over the years. And with that system, I just took a look at it and I said to myself, this thing's going to produce. There's so much spin in the atmosphere. The wall cloud was hugging the ground and just sucking up scud from the farm fields. That's a sign of we have a very strong inflow into this storm. We have a lot of strong lift. We have a lot of spin because that entire wall cloud was spinning like a top. And that was where I had to kind of settle myself down going, okay, this is going to happen.
We're sitting there and we can see the wall cloud of the what would become the Spiritwood tornado.
We saw a little rope funnel come down. I just pulled over real quick and got out. It ascended, but then it started to really like take that cone form, and I got to just park my camera right out there and get the first genesis of what came out to be a large wedge tornado. Sometimes chasing really comes down to like making the right move or the wrong move at the right time. You know, you got to really scan your roads, okay, because number one, escape route. Absolutely have to have that. You know, you got to be able to duck out of a bad situation if needed.
One of the things I was cognizant about is I did not want to get into hail, because if you get into the heavy rain, into the hail, you're not going to see the tornado and you're not going to see if there's something else ongoing. Storms are always a process, and I think as chasers we sometimes forget that. We kind of get caught up in that moment. I've always tried to tell myself storms are a process. They're always evolving, they're always changing. And I need to make sure that I respect that, especially on a day with the parameters that we had that were conducive to producing the potential for some stronger, higher end tornadoes.
Shane was a south of us, and he got a little more high contrast view for a little bit longer.
It went from a cone right away. It was a beautiful cone, illuminated by the sunlight, and it formed into a massive cone, almost wedge tornado. It was the biggest tornado I've seen in North Dakota, the most well-defined big tornado.
It's just this, what we call a stovepipe, this cylinder coming down, and just, it looks so strong. And I can't help thinking of, you know, this is the 68 years to the day of the Fargo F5 tornado, which is one of the most famous tornadoes in history, and Spiritwood looks just like it. And I was just like, are you kidding me?
That speaks to us about the peak in our severe weather season and the peak of the time of the year when we can get strong and violent tornadoes, that mid-June to mid-July timeframe. That's not to say that we're out of the woods other times of the year, but that June 20th date is not by coincidence, in a sense that is right during the peak of all these ingredients coming together in North Dakota to be able to produce these kind of tornadoes.
The Spiritwood EF3 tornado arced around the area for 8.6 miles with peak winds of 155 miles per hour and a max width of more than a half mile, impacting farmsteads like Carla's.
I'm originally from the Spiritwood area, and my mom still lives on a family farm, and I usually try to make it back at least a couple times a month. It just so happened that this particular Friday, I was headed back to the farm because Mom and I were headed to a wedding in Minnesota. Leading up to that particular day, you would watch the news and stuff, and you had seen all of your warnings that you all had put out. So we knew there was a potential of bad weather, but that day I left Bismarck and it didn't look bad. You know, it looked like a normal day. I'm a faithful news watcher, and so we were watching all the alerts. You know, we saw things on social media. So we were being weather aware, I guess. We had run into Jamestown and had some dinner, and then decided we better get home because the clouds were moving in pretty quickly, and they were getting dark. And so we got home, we got in the garage, and then stood outside like all people do and watched the clouds just start to roll, and it got scary real quick. So Mom and I went down to the basement, and we were watching TV, trying to watch warnings and such, because we didn't know how close. You know, when the clouds are moving in, you know exactly how close are they, and you just don't know. And the electricity went out, and then you could hear the wind picking up. And so we hit the hallway, and after things started moving around outside, you could hear things hitting the house. And so I'm like, maybe we should get in the shower. And so we got into the bathroom and into the shower, which is all cinder block shower. And we hid out in there. And it was scary because you didn't know, as you're standing there, what we were gonna walk up the stairs to find. We had no clue what was happening above us. And it was just the wind it just growled, not like the freight train noise that you hear, but it did just growl, and the noise of things hitting the house was scary. It felt like an eternity, and yet it was over within just minutes. And that was probably what was scariest, is because, like I said, you're downstairs, you don't know what's going on, and you are anticipating the best, but you know that what's going on. And so when we went upstairs, then after things seemed to calm down, we looked down across the yard, and we had a pig barn that housed about 2,000 hogs at one time. We haven't been in that business for a long time, but it was mostly gone. The grain bin's gone. We had a dryer shed, it was gone. Our old feed shed was gone. And it was like there was debris, but where those buildings specifically sat, nothing. You couldn't even tell there was a building there. It was just a cement slab. It was kind of freaky, really, Eerie, maybe is the better word. We were lucky that the house was still standing. We had the house left, we had a shop, and our Morton building was still standing. Otherwise, every other structure on our farm was gone. And we looked over, and our neighbor's house was completely gone. She was in the basement with her dogs. She was not hurt, so they were able to get her out of the basement. But to know that we could have lost absolutely everything, I mean, we lost a lot, but we could have lost a lot more. And so to have the house that I grew up in, and to be able to say that I'm safe, my mom and I are still here, really something that you look back on, and we're really fortunate. And the next day we were out and we were cleaning up, and I found a chair laying just really close to where our dryer shed used to be. I sat the chair up on the cement slab, and I just sat there and looked around. It was sad. It wasn't the same place that I knew growing up. And I knew that things wouldn't be the same. And it just, again, one of those eerie feelings that you just, you have to comprehend, like, it's something new now. But the cleanup process and finding little things all over, that was hard. They were finding pieces of some of our buildings over 2-3 miles away. So that was pretty scary, but you found just different things. Of all things, since I work with 4-H and Extension, I found a pen that said Burleigh County Extension. It was the oddest thing ever, but it made me smile. And there was things like some of my dad's toys growing up. We found some of those things. A lot of it couldn't be salvaged, but there were some things that we were able to find and keep back, so that was good. We had a nice big crew that came out and helped with tree removal and debris removal. The young man who actually rents our land, he came down with his hired men and helped clean up debris out of the fields, because of course they still have to farm. And so, when you find big pieces of tin and wood and everything out in the field, they helped do a lot of cleanup. So it was a lot of community. We're thankful in North Dakota that we have that. We have great neighbors. And even the night of the tornado, there was people coming up our driveway just to make sure that we were okay. And that meant a lot. Our little stretch of the highway won't ever be the same, but yeah, it's just the force of nature and how things can change on a dime here in North Dakota, or anywhere really.
Another Spiritwood family impacted was the Hovdas, who also took shelter in their basement bathroom, put the kids in the bathtub, and used their bodies to barricade the door.
Very scary, hearing the windows blow open and everything crashing down, and we were all trying to hold the door shut.
I was just waiting for us to all be sucked up. That was my only thought. These are our last moments together. It's all I kept thinking.
Even though everything in their home was lost, Crystal is thankful her husband and children survived.
The following days, we said we could be planning a funeral right now, and we're not. Things can be replaced, people can't. So we're very, very blessed in that.
Community support will help the Hovdas rebuild and move forward with a newfound respect for the power of tornadoes that Carla also shares.
Don't mistake the wrath of what Mother Nature can do. And I think that's a big one that came out of this. After the storm, any other time that there was a level 1 or level 2 that popped up, not gonna lie, a little PTSD. Things that would be going on, I'd be like, I need to get home, I need to get my car in the garage, and I need to get someplace safe. And it was probably just, just a small thunderstorm coming through. But that's where your mind goes, because you don't want to live it again. And so you think the worst and you prepare for it just because you've been there. And I think that's probably what I don't take for granted anymore. So the weather definitely am paying attention all the time, just because, like I said, it can turn on a dime, and it's nothing to mess around with.
We finally did manage to catch back up, and that was right when spirit wood was roping out, as we call it, where it's getting really thin and kind of rope-like and wispy. And usually that phase only lasts for a minute or two, and then the tornadoes will dissipate, or they'll lift, they'll vanish. But this one hung around for like 8 to 10 minutes. It was pretty wild. And it was moving like straight west, which is also pretty wild.
With the way the storms were evolving that day, they were evolving very close to Interstate 94. So I would be able to see the storm, watch it for 5 or so minutes, get on I-94, go a couple miles east, and then get off the interstate, go a mile or two north or south, depending upon where the storm was at that time, and watch the next tornado start to form. That's where we saw the Valley City tornado start to form, and the Sanborn tornado as well.
We got back on interstate to try to get ahead of the storm and get in front of the updraft again, and an anticyclonic tornado formed right to the south of I-94. So that caught my attention.
And honestly, I didn't even notice it. Shane's like, "Is that a funnel forming right there?" I'm like, "God, no, yeah, that is." And and that was the anticyclonic one that formed just to the south of that. I didn't even notice that at the time, honestly. I was just like, cool, tornado, let's go. And I started driving. We were somewhere up by Sanborn.
It was actually spinning backwards. And those tornadoes, I've learned now through seeing a couple of them this year, are also just incredibly photogenic. And so I basically lost it. I ran out of words.
You got to watch that touchdown and then rope out in its full splendor. Yeah, holy smokes. I didn't even notice that it was anticyclonic until someone made the comment about it. And after the fact, I noticed and really played back my video and slowed it down. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a long one too. A monumental day in many regards.
In my video on the event, I call it the dream chase because it really was just perfect from a storm chasing perspective. Being able to chase in North Dakota, a place that is like a second home to me, and I've always visited my whole life. And I've always, since I've been storm chasing, kind of dreamed of what it would be like to watch a tornado from 10 miles away that looks like it's right next door, because it's just the fully open sky.
These aren't things that happen every day for a chaser. You may watch YouTube and these reality shows and it makes it look like you catch everything all the time, but you put a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of miles on the road, sleepless nights, to have 2 days back to back like that in North Dakota where I live, where I'm from. That was it. That was it for me.
It sort of started to become really what we call high precipitation. So the place where the tornadoes were starting to fill in with a lot of rain. And it was becoming hard to see the tornadoes. We caught a few glimpses of the Valley City EF2, but not really much after that.
After producing the Spiritwood, Sanborn, and Valley City tornadoes, the northern supercell merged with an even stronger southern storm that was in perfect position to continue producing tornadoes as some storm chasers watched on.
I didn't leave till about 5 o'clock that day. I took my time getting off work and taking my time reading the models, making sure. Went down to just by Carrington and sat for a little bit. Now I noticed the tower starting to fire, so I'm like, okay, I just waited a little bit, and then I took off, got going. I seen that southern storm, so I decided to go after the southern storm. Jumped on that one and followed it. It turned into a really nice mothership. That's basically, it had really some decent structure on it. And then I noticed all the reports of the tornado up north. I'm like, well, I'm sticking to my guns. I'm going to stick with this southern storm. Followed right along with it. It did produce a tornado near Adrian, which was kind of, I seen all the dust and everything, but I couldn't really tell the rotation, if it was solid rotation or anything like that. But then it got going, then it lifted up, and then it just moved along for a while. It was just a big, very big bowl shape. It looked like a vase almost like that. The whole thing was just spinning. It's a little bit elevated off the ground. There's not a lot of precipitation at the time of the storm. There was a low precipitation supercell. But then as it moved along, it started to get lower to the ground. All of a sudden it starts pulling clouds, and it was getting dark at the time. And the lightning just started going off from there. And then I stayed fairly south of it. When I got to Lisbon, it was just lightning, just constant CGs and everything. And then went east, just watched it from a distance. And you could see the structure, you see the bell shape on the bottom and everything like that, and the lightning and everything. And I just kind of stayed back. You just start seeing it transform into something else from what it was to transforming into the beast that would produce the Enderlin tornado.
Ominously illuminated by lightning, the storm's mesocyclone can be seen from Enderlin. East of town, a deadly tornado descended from this massive rotating cloud. It was the first EF5 tornado anywhere in the United States in more than 12 years, and the first to be rated at the top of the scale in North Dakota since the 1957 Fargo tornado, which also occurred on June 20th. The Enderlin tornado touched down around 11 p.m. and for about 12 miles carved a path of destruction in 20 minutes, arcing from south to north with a max width of more than a mile. The EF5 rating would come a few months later as a train derailment was analyzed. Homes were also destroyed along Highway 46, including Tyler Pfaff's residence, where he and his wife were.
We watched the thunderstorm up there, and then at like 9 o'clock, and you could see like the wall cloud over there with just little lightning in the cloud, and my wife's like, I don't think that's good. And I'm like, well, I flunked that part of science, you know, not a meteorologist. Then we started hearing tornado warnings over by Fort Ransom and Lisbon, and we started taking things serious and came inside. She got all her animals inside the house, and we turned on KBLY.
This is a separate one from the one that's along the I-94 corridor. This one's just a little bit further to the south.
We kind of walked out, looked at stuff, you know, it seemed nothing stormish or anything like that, and kept on watching the news, and then the power would go out, and then get that all ran back up, and pretty soon I looked at my cell phone and it said, you're in extreme danger. And I was like, hit okay, and I looked to the south because that was the only direction we can actually see. Turned around and went to listen to the news again, and I was like, you know, I didn't see that cell phone tower over there. And I turned around and I looked at my phone again. It said, you're in extreme danger, and I was like, okay. All I could see was that it was all black over there with the lightning, and I didn't have cell phone service, so I knew must have got hit. And then I felt a little pressure on my ear, and I'm like, we need to get in the bathroom because something's off, you know. So we ran into the bathroom. I was like, never had that happen. And then when we got in the bathroom, we could feel the pressure in our ears more. Stuff started hitting our house. All I could hear was just this whoosh, and I was like, it sounded like the roof. And then it was kind of over. I actually did say to my wife, so I was pretty sure it was a tornado. I was like, we just survived a tornado, you know, and because, you know, it was like, holy, you know, we're alive. And then walked out, and the roof was gone, and trees and everything were all messed up, and cars were gone. And my wife's Camaro flew up against that electric post. I had a Ranger there, flew a quarter mile away. It was frantic.
Us responding down to the Enderlin area, where it was reported that a house was experiencing a gas leak and that the roof had come off of the residence. So that's what we were initially responding to.
We went to the first house, and the individual's roof was completely gone. They were both outside, they were okay. And at that point we realized that their neighbor, just to the east, their house was gone.
Those neighbors were Tyler Pfaff's aunt and uncle.
Standing down there, I could see their vehicles. So I didn't think really anything happened over there because the vehicles were still parked where they were. And then we drove over there. They're like, where's the house? Where's the house? And I was like, well, it's up here. It's up here. And then we got up there and it was gone, you know, to the foundation. So then I got out of the car and yelled down into the basement. Well, there was no reply. So I don't know. It was just one of those things where it was like, obviously they're gone, you know. In my mind, that was the first thing in my mind, because they didn't answer. It's going to be tough, but I have such good memories of my aunt and uncle, and I always smile because they still mow the lawn here. And they used to watch me do stuff like, oh, he's mowing the lawn, or, oh, we saw you blowing the snow out, you look like an idiot. You know, and then go over there, have a few beers or with them, and if I had a problem here, I had a lot of old stuff, so my uncle was really good at fixing stuff, so he would come over and fix stuff. So it's just the memories of them, and then, you know, it's gonna be tough, but I don't know how to say it, like, just put a smile on my face knowing that they helped out.
The tornado claimed 3 lives in total, the deadliest twister in the state in almost 50 years.
They had funerals for my aunt and uncle, and a lot of people showed up, and there was a lot of donations.
The lady who passed away in Enderlin, Kathy is her name, and she is the mom of one of my classmates from high school. And so to know that damage can be so severe that people can lose their lives, it's just unbelievable to me how a storm can do so much damage. And you hear about it, you see it in the movies, but when you live it, it's a whole different story.
Despite this tragedy so close by, as Tyler walks along the land where his house once stood and reminisces about the spot where he got married, he still plans to rebuild on this property.
Those first 3 days were pretty busy, and it was 90 degrees out and lots of people, and it was just like I was in a daze trying to help, but really didn't do anything. But everybody else, my brother and family, friends, kind of directed us, and, you know, because we were just stunned as we could be.
Getting on scene and just seeing the level of destruction from an event like this, and understanding how quick things can change for people, and you can find yourself in bad situations. And then understanding from my perspective as a leader of an agency on what type of resources and response that we need, and if we ever experience something like this again. Because when you have people that experience a situation like this, I mean, they're looking for first responders to law enforcement for assistance. And certainly we're very fortunate in this area to have the first responders that we do. Of course, they're all volunteers. So that evening when we got down there, we didn't know, number one, the extent of the damage, but then also if there were going to be more storms that were going to come through the area. So we had a number of people in that first responder capacity that were responding down to that area, putting their lives in danger to make sure that we could assist people however we could.
That's what you do in a small community. You help everybody out, whether you're neighbor, friend, know them or not. You help your neighbor out. Given the fact I live 1.5 miles away and it missed my home by less than 1/2 mile, you know that they would have done that for you. The outpour of support and people willing to lend a hand in this community is amazing.
We have almost the worst of Mother Nature, and then we have the best that we have as North Dakotans. We band together, we help each other out, and that makes me proud to live in this community.
As the cleanup continued, scientists analyzed the damage and upgraded the tornado's initial rating of EF3.
The western house along Highway 46 there, we looked at it a couple times and determined that with most of the debris kind of being swept clean and kind of scattered rather than deposited in pieces, like it was mostly that, it was kind of a higher end than what we originally decided with that EF3, so that moved that to that EF4 range. And then the tree damage, looking at the debarking and the kind of the sandpapering, and also root ball displacement where trees are broken and then kind of pulled up out of the ground away from their root ball and displaced away from the spot they were growing, that was also our EF4 indicator.
The tornado was at its peak intensity southeast of Enderlin along these train tracks, where 33 train cars were derailed, some of which were hurled into this field.
In fact, one in particular came uncoupled and was several hundred yards away. That was very impressive to me. I mean, it's one thing for a train to be knocked over. That doesn't take too much wind to do. But to uncouple it like that and to actually have it tumble hundreds of yards away, that was certainly very impressive.
The use of unique damage indicators like the train cars that were once here helped meteorologists apply new research in order to determine the wind speeds that were within that tornado.
We're dealing with something unusual when we have a train that's hit by a tornado. And that's not on our damage indicator catalog that we use to try to write and define a rating for the wind speed that does damage. And so we knew we kind of had this special case, and we knew it was going to take longer than normal for a rating to try to really give it the attention and, quite frankly, the amount of work that it deserves. If Mother Nature creates an event where you kind of break the scale or it shows you something it hasn't shown before, you shouldn't not acknowledge that, right? And so going through the process of talking to the wind engineers, talking to people that are working on an update to our damage catalog.
What I do is I go out and I look at damage and destruction after tornadoes and hurricanes. And to me, that's evidence. And we can tell a lot of information from the evidence left behind by Mother Nature.
Tim Marshall was in North Dakota on June 20th to study hail, but later got a call from the National Weather Service.
They provided me with the weights of the tanker cars and the box cars, and the box cars were full of grain, and the tanker cars were empty. But they provided me some information and asked me if I were able to calculate what winds it would take to do that kind of damage to a train. And so I did that, and I came up with the conclusion that it took more than a 200-mile-an-hour wind to do that kind of damage, which would place it, of course, on the EF5 rating. But trains are not part of the damage indicators in the EF scale, so that created a kind of a dilemma. It came down to asking another panel of engineers from Canada, and they did some numerical analysis, and they also got more than 200-mile-an-hour winds. So the fact that we had multiple engineers coming up with the same opinion was sufficient evidence, I think, to put forth the idea that, hey, we could have an EF5 here in North Dakota.
Now you want to just make sure everybody is aware that this is what you're thinking. It's going to get media attention. We're going to make sure, oh, we got this lined up. Yep, that makes sense. Okay, you know, my boss's approval, their boss's approval. You know, we talked all the way up to the director of the Weather Service for this.
Things like this example here add to the science. And so we're always looking for adding more information. And so I like to see damage surveys continue, and pushing for more evidence out there is the key. In fact, this has started a whole nother chain of events. People have come up with the idea on this EF scale team that I'm on, well, maybe we better include trains. And so there is now a research effort going on to gather enough information so that we could add another damage indicator to the EF scale based on the Enderlin tornado. All comes full circle, I think. Eventually, a tornado that's very intense is going to hit something that we can rate, and that happened to be this case. Otherwise, if the train wasn't there, it's very likelihood this tornado would have just been rated EF3. Tornadoes need to hit something in order for them to be rated. If they're out there in the open country and they don't hit anything, then we can't really rate them. And it's important to do that because of many, many factors. Part of it is that there are insurance companies and actuarials and statisticians that deal with the footprint of the tornado and your risk. You know, when you pay your insurance, it's based off risk, and they model that. And so tornadoes in North Dakota are modeled for your insurance rates. So this will add some more detail to a process that really is largely unknown when tornadoes are out in the open country. We don't know if they're EF0 or EF5. So what are we going to do to assign a number to them? Well, by having trains now involved in the process, this helps identify it better.
In total, 24 tornadoes occurred on June 20th, tying a record previously set on June 11, 1976, for the most tornadoes in a calendar day ever recorded in North Dakota. Their ratings span the scale from the devastating EF5 Enderlin and EF3 Spiritwood tornadoes to a handful of weaker ones. This was certainly a summer solstice to remember, but the summer of tornadoes was just getting started.
We were 1 week post the events of June 19th and 20th. So for the chasers who were able to document those days, we were still running on a pretty big wave of emotion. So come another chase event in North Dakota, we were pretty excited to get back out. They had given it 5% tornado probabilities. So that to a chaser is enough to get us out.
See an influx of people at the Bismarck Man Dam when it's the last weekend of June for the McQuaid tournament. There's a lot of excitement in the air, but also a lot of humidity too, and that could fuel some thunderstorms later on this evening.
We knew there was a broad area of mid to upper 60 dew points around central and western North Dakota, and there was also good wind profiles in each area, so it was a hard decision to make. Do we want to play west of the river, or do we want to play the northern target? The decision was made to go up to Washburn. It was kind of waiting there for 3 hours for something to happen, watching satellite. I was on a country road watching this nice supercell come in. It had a rotating updraft, it wasn't full of rain, and I see a car coming down the country road, and who is it? It's Josh Fry.
They kind of struggled for a while, and then we sat a little bit, and then another wave formed just north of the lake.
It was awesome to see him again. We were both on the same supercell, but we quickly realized this supercell was dying. We were getting reports of a cell by center that was tornadic, and it produced at least one tornado. So the decision was made quickly that we need to abandon the storm and get back south. Intercepted that storm as it crossed through Bismarck. It was rotating hard. I kept up with it until about Sterling. There were multiple attempts at tornado genesis from my point of view. I got to the Minokan exit, set up shop, and watched the supercell come in through Bismarck, drop the 2 tornadoes north of town.
All right, everybody, greetings once again with you, with meteorologist Jacob Morse. I'm meteorologist Kevin Lawrence, tracking tornadoes. They are confirmed.
These back-to-back tornadoes touched down about 7 miles north of downtown Bismarck near 110th Avenue, with one of them doing damage to a property. This was the first time a tornado had come this close to the city limits in about 20 years.
It was crazy, and to witness nature's power so directly was just fascinating to see. The way the clouds moved with the swirling, the electricity just constant within the sky, and then just to actually see a tornado move around and just witness how fast they move. I think that was the biggest thing for us, just how fast it was.
One of the reasons those tornadoes were so visible from Bismarck is they formed on the south side of the supercell thunderstorm. And so that's a typical area where that really warm, unstable air reaches into the supercell. The whole storm is rotating, but the tornadoes very frequently form on the south side near the hook echo of those supercells. On June 27th, those supercells were just north of Bismarck, which meant that the hook echo region was just north of Bismarck, and the tornado that occurred in that particular region of the storm, highly visible from Bismarck. Now, the exact shape of the tornadoes is an area of more research probably needed, but the low-level parts of the wind shear, again, probably played some role in exactly the shape of those tornadoes. When we're issuing tornado warnings, that's a high stakes thing. We want folks to get the best message as early as they possibly can so that they can take shelter. On June 27th, we had a number of people working in the office that particular evening, helping make decisions, and we were issuing tornado warnings as we saw features show up on radar, and as we were really using our expert analysis of the atmosphere in combination with that radar data to make those decisions. I can tell you it's a very controlled chaos when those are going on, and everyone's got a task at hand. We try to have folks that are, so to speak, in chairs where they are the experts at doing those things to provide the best level of service that we can do. So we're issuing tornado warnings, we're coordinating with dispatch centers, emergency managers to also talk to them one-on-one, answer questions as they're making decisions to also help protect the population. And we're doing that no matter if it's a rural area where there's tornadoes or if it's somewhere in a metro area like the Bismarck-Mandan area like we saw on June 27th, when certainly there was an amplified concern as the tornadoes approached the city area. We're issuing tornado warnings and doing all the communication and messaging that we could to try and prepare people, in combination, of course, with all of the meteorologists from our region, including our broadcast meteorologist friends.
After the North Bismarck tornadoes around 10:30 p.m., more rotation would lead to twisters into the night.
Drove to Minokan, cut south, and then as I cut south, got to the Moffett Road. That's when I noticed I could see it starting to develop a clear slot around the base of the storm. I was like, okay, I think it's starting to develop something here. Yep, and then all of a sudden it started lowering through the lightning. Because at 11 o'clock at night, the only way you're going to see a tornado is with flashes of lightning, and that one, you can see the dust on the ground and everything. So I'm like, okay, yep, she's a tornado.
Ultimately, the storms were relatively isolated. Again, they were able to take advantage of the energy and the wind shear that was in the atmosphere, but on a relatively isolated basis. They weren't really competing for that energy in the atmosphere with other storms nearby, and that's because the frontal system wasn't stronger than it was. So instead of the storms forming into a line, which typically results in more of a wind threat, they were once again able to maintain a supercellular, more isolated nature. And on June 27th in particular, what happened is the low-level wind shear, that turning of wind with height near the ground layer, really increased in the late evening. And that was really well timed with the maintenance of these supercell thunderstorms into the late evening, near dark and after dark. And they took advantage of that increase in that wind shear. We actually saw the supercells persisting late enough into the evening that they sort of matched that increase in winds just a few thousand feet above the ground, that low-level jet, which contributed to stronger wind shear and led to the rotation and the tornado development with those supercells. So a lot of the tornadoes that occurred on June 27th, thankfully, did avoid creating damage, but there were multiples. Some of them were cyclical supercells, so producing multiple tornadoes. A lot of them were rated EF unknown, meaning that they didn't do any damage. And then there was one that was rated EF2 down near Tembic in Emmons County, which caused damage to structures and resulted in that more significant type tornado damage.
The next day, 2 landspout tornadoes were captured in Foster County as the tornado tally continued to climb in the midsummer, with 5 weak ones in the northeast on July 7th. A month later, 13 additional EF0 and EF1 tornadoes touched down, including one that tracked through Grand Forks for the first time in at least 15 years. These quick tornadoes were embedded within several intense lines of thunderstorms that crossed the state late August 7th into the early morning of August 8th. A couple of weeks later, an EF1 tornado danced behind the Dakota Magic Casino in far southeast North Dakota on August 21st. Then a brief landspout tornado south of Beulah rounded out August on the 30th. But the tornado summer wasn't done yet, as September had a few more surprises.
It's not uncommon to chase up here in September, but the historic day that followed, nobody was ready for that.
I knew there was a low-end chance of tornadoes in the south central part of the state, and it's September and it's towards the end of the season, so I'm like, we'll go down there and see what happens. I just left mine at around noon. There was already a report of a tornado down by Mobridge. It was working its way north.
It was a very tough decision. What side of the river do you play? Because there's very limited crossings. There's Mobridge, Bismarck, Washburn, right? And they were following the east side of the river. So I checkmarked that off. That was a good decision to stay east that day.
West of Linton, near the Missouri River, an EF2 tornado destroyed a farm storage shed with estimated peak winds of 120 miles per hour just after 2 p.m.
Soon it got wrapped in its own precept and expanded. We follow it north up Highway 1804, multiple brief funnels. It was hard to really differentiate, was it on the ground versus wasn't it because of the rain. I mean, if you weren't right up next to it, you couldn't see the actual ground contact. One of the things I'll take away from that day was how tropical it felt. I didn't encounter any hail that day. It was all tornadic, and and some flooding issues that day, but I didn't have any hail, and I was down in the core of some of those storms.
Weird when you can see the base of the storm and just barely look up and you can see the top of the storm. It was just, with those low top supercells that day, the shear was just crazy with what was going on.
Next, near Hazelton Recreational Area, I had an encounter maybe 300 feet away with a funnel connected to the ground throwing up debris. That thing quickly diminished. After that experience, we followed the supercell up 1804 towards Menoken, the Bismarck area, where there was 2 more tornadoes. Again, very hard to see. I had my eyes set on one developing tornado, and then coming into the screen is one that's on the ground, you know, maybe a couple minutes, but then it dissipates. It's like, so you have to have your head on a swivel, and that's what I remember about that day as well.
This wasn't a particularly hot day. Temperatures were mostly in the 60s, but there was a strong area of low pressure, small, compact, with a warm front extending east of that front and really high dew point air. There was a lot of reasons for spin in that kind of atmosphere, and those storms developed and moved northward with that area of low pressure and became prolific tornado producers. The tornado movement was unusual by North Dakota standards. Some 70 or 80% of our tornado warnings actually do have a movement that's either to the east or northeast. In this particular day, it was almost due north or slightly northwest at times.
One area would just start to really tighten and swirl, but then there would be another area right behind it that was waiting its turn. You know, that would go down, the next one would come in. It was a lot of chaos.
Went to Driscoll. There was a storm starting to form just south of Driscoll, and then it started working its way north. I just sat there, let it come over me, and all of a sudden, here comes roaring over the shelter belt. It goes right over where the spot where I was. I'm like, okay, well, that's a great way to start the day. So I fallen behind that one, and it faded away about 2 minutes later. Stayed behind the cell, and then it put another one down by Arena. And that one was a big tornado right there for a while. Then it lifted again, kept working its way north towards Denhoff, lowered another one down, went across a pond. Then it kept going all the way up, and all of a sudden it lowered down, and that's when it became the big wedge that went just south of Denhoff and went through that farmstead right there. That's always a thing as a storm chaser you don't want to see. You never really want to ever see a tornado hit a house or hit anything. You just be out in the middle of the country, just going along, doing its thing, not hitting a house or anything like that. That's pretty much always one thing I always worry about when I'm out and about, is seeing someone's place getting hit, because I seen that on September 14th. I seen that one farmhouse, the roof fly up in the air.
That tornado was rated EF2 with another EF1 tornado near Mercer.
But really, there were a few brief tornadoes that you had to be really close to them to see an actual ground circulation, because if they weren't hitting anything, it's hard to know.
We did have the benefit of a lot of storm spotters and storm chasers in the area that were viewing the tornadoes, seeing them in real time, relaying that information to us in real time. We were able to use that information to corroborate what we were seeing on the radar and what we were seeing in the atmospheric setup to help with our tornado warnings. And in the days after, our experts dig through and sift through all that data and are able to use all the reports that we receive to make sure that the storm database, the long-term historical record, has all of those key features and all those reports as accurately in it as possible. Technology has played a role in us getting more reports in real time, and a lot of times some tornadoes that maybe we wouldn't have heard of 10, 20, 30 years ago, we are hearing about now. So that certainly contributes to the record in a positive way, in the sense that we have a better, clean record of what's actually occurring in North Dakota. That doesn't take away from the fact that this was a high-end, busy tornado year. But technology, cell phones, storm chasers that are streaming live events, minute by minute, play by play of storms visually on the ground that we can, again, corroborate with radar data, certainly makes for a more accurate record. But we do need to consider the fact that we're looking at all those things, plus post-event high-resolution satellite data to be able to find certain damaged tracks that occurred on the ground from events. Certainly plays a role in making sure that we know that, yes, we are hearing more about the tornadoes that are occurring in today's world than we did historically.
Just before the summer came to a close, weak tornadoes were spotted near Arnegard and Windmere on September 17th and 18th, putting the month's total at 23. Just 2% of all tornadoes on record in North Dakota have occurred in September, with a combined 31 tornado warnings. 25 tornado warnings were issued in September 2025 alone. The final historic tally for tornadoes in North Dakota in 2025 was 82, by far the most on record. About 60% were rated EF0 or EF unknown. However, the handful of stronger tornadoes throughout the summer definitely left their mark.
Certainly an abnormal year. We've had other years where we had a tremendous amount of severe weather, but it's been a while. So this was a stark reminder that yes, in the northern plains, in North Dakota and the surrounding regions during the summertime, we are certainly at risk of severe thunderstorms. Always important to stay vigilant to the weather, to have multiple sources of weather information that you trust, and to be able to have those plans in place to take action if watches or warnings are issued for your area.